I mean, from landing on the moon and talking about eclipse and computers and chemistry, the chemical elements, everything. I mean, there was twice a year that Rebbe would speak to the college students when they had vacation, end of December, end of June, and the Rebbe would dedicate a sikha in something new in technology. I mean, the Rebbe spoke about Shakespeare, the Rebbe spoke about Mr. Columbus, the Rebbe spoke about Lincoln. Prussian lines that the Rebbe dropped, which are Prussian. People are not aware how much the Rebbe thoroughly covered what he felt needs to be covered.
Welcome everyone to the podcast Hasei Rav. The purpose of this podcast is to bridge the gap between Rabbanim and Mashpim and the Anash community. I am doing this with my friend Rebbe Bassman, who is the Menahel of several Halacha and Chassidus projects.
Thank you, Levi. Baruch Hashem is a schus that I have the exposure to many prestigious Rabbanim and Mashpim who are often not given a proper platform. This podcast, Hasei Rav, will give a voice to these Rabbanim and Mashpim to share their thinking, their hashkafa, Chassidus, a deep dive into their backstory to help uplift the entire community.
Please consider subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing, because that helps the algorithm bring it to more people, which changes lives and brings Mashiach.
Grace and Yasher Kayach, Rabbi Seligson, for joining us on the Hasei Rav podcast. It's a big schus. I'm humbled as I have 5 of Rabbi Seligson's seforim on my table over here. We know the special schus of someone that I was just speaking to one of my colleagues. He's helping to prepare the material for one of the sugyas of Kollel Dach. And I said, the schus of harving and a sugya of Chassidus. So here, Baruch Hashem, we're in the presence of someone that Pashat spent thousands of hours doing a service for the community of Anash and really for the whole world in so many different areas, but essentially organizing Chassidus, I think, is one of the big things. And really, Chassidus is so complicated, and he enabled to crush that gem of the king in a way where we're able to tap into it. Rabbi Seligson is a mashpia in Crown Heights, in Likkutei, as well as a mechaber of many seforim. Today, depending on our time, this might have to be a part 1. I'd like to get into 3 of Rabbi Seligson's seforim and some of the backstory. I'd like to start off with, I lift weights as part of my exercise regimen, so I can probably use this as my 10-pounder. Rabbi Seligson's 1,600-page mafteach on Sichas Kaidish, just on the Rebbe's Torah. He also worked on many of the indexes for the Rebbeim. And as well, I think this is perhaps the least known of Rabbi Seligson's works, and we'll talk about where perhaps we can get it. But it's a 3-volume set, I think close to 1,000 pages of Rabbi Seligson's super commentary on the Rebbe's Hayom Yom, which I'd like to really dive into. I had to borrow this from my shver, and then I have a bit of a weakness for Inyani Halacha and Minhag. So Rabbi Seligson's sefer he published a couple of years ago on Minhagim of Shabbos and Yontif. Like to at least get our toes wet into some of that and hear some firsthand. So Yashikaya for joining us.
Okay. Pleasure.
And in terms of the mafteches, how did you get into starting to write indexes and mafteches? Did you come up with that on your own, or was that something the Rebbe encouraged you? How did you get into that?
I began working on mafteches, on indexes, cataloging different topics in Mamorim of the Rebbe Rashab. Did various years. When I began, before beginning, I actually wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said I should speak over with more people who are already in it, and that was it. And
you actually started. It was your idea to work on the Rebbe Rashab's mafteches.
Yeah, I felt it's poshut. There's a need, although there were indexes made by the Rebbe, very general ones, just referring to the title of the mamer, no page numbers, because the Rebbe then did not have page numbers. The seforim were not printed yet; they were manuscripts. But in the end of the 70s, the end of the Lamets, I had an interest, and while they were preparing the sefer for print, I was doing the mafteach, which is not an easy job, because basically the sefer is ready in pages, it's complete, and they need to go to press. And here, a mafteach takes time to learn through briefly the sefer and create entries for all the topics in the sefer. So that usually was somewhat of a lachatz, pressure. But Baruch Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem, I was able to make mafteches on the Mamorim of the Rebbe Rashab, the nuns, some of the nuns, Dalet and Hey, also Ayin Tes Pei, and Vav also, which basically were Mamorim of the Rebbe Rashab. And then when they were ready to publish it, they asked the Rebbe if they can include it, and the Rebbe said yes, and it went in. It's published and included in the back of the Sefer HaMamorim of that respective year. And from there, maybe that could have been the background, but many years later, this is about 10 years later, after the Rebbe had a stroke, one thing that really dawned on me is that there's so much from the Rebbe. I was also giving shiurim, and as I give today, and a lot is compiled from the Rebbe Sichas on different various topics. So I really felt that I need to jump into this to push it, make a mafteach on the Rebbe Sichas. It sounded a little wild. People ask me, did you realize what you're getting into? I said, listen, everything goes slowly. You're standing by Empire State Building. There's over 100 floors. So you're on the ground floor, then you go to the first floor, the second floor. And Tzibislach, in about 2.5 years, was able to complete a mafteach on the first 14 years of the Rebbe's Nesios. Sichas. It was actually Erev Shabbos Kedach, 2 days before Gimel Tammuz Tavshin Nun Dalet. I notified one of the maskirim. He notified the Rebbe. This was mamish 2 days before Gimel Tammuz, that we had a mafteach from Tavshin Yud Dalef till Tavshin Chav Dalet. And after that, I continued weiter. My plan was to make it in different volumes, but then decided to include everything in one. And about a few years later, I would say in total an overview about during the duration of 10 years, which this was done on my spare time, I completed the mafteach. Then we needed sponsors, so everything is hakel toli b'mazel. Everything depends on mazel, even a sefer Torah shebeheichel. And it came out, Baruch Hashem, in Ayin Beis, which is late 2011, or actually even earlier. There were 2 editions that came out, one, and a year later a second one. And now we're already almost done with the second edition, and we need to take in consideration a reprint.
Wow. So what's your process to writing an index? It's like, how do you go about that? How do you choose the topics? What look like?
The topics basically is not that I start looking for everything that's under Aleph and Beis and Gimel. I learn page by page. Each page, if I see there's any key words, any basic concepts or concepts in general that the Rebbe explains, it will be a benefit for those that will have this reference. And that's how it goes from page to page. Generally, the Rebbe was for a mafteach on topics, not so much a mafteach on psukim, verses, or quotes from our sages, Shas.
So how did that come in? How did that come into adding that?
So that basically comes along the way. For example, if there is on one page a concept that's called Atzilus, so that's a topic, an entry. If, for example, the Rebbe is on that page also explaining a certain verse or a quote from our sages or a Rambam or a Shulchan Aruch, something from any of these seforim, it would be listed in a different section. And that's how I would gather and build up the collection. And later, everything would be set up in its section, in its appropriate section. The Mafteach generally, the first part of the Mafteach, which is the bulk of the sefer, are the inyanim, are basically the topics. I have actually 36 pages of listings of titles, the beginning of the Mafteach. After that comes a listing how the Rebbe explains psukim in Chumash, in Nevi'im, in Ksuvim. Then there's a listing where the Rebbe explains the Rashis, the famous Rashi Sichos of the Rebbe. And then there is the Talmud, Shas, Bavli, Yerushalmi. Then comes the Zayar, then the Medrash and the Zayar, and then comes the Rambam, and then comes the various seforim of Daily Yisrael, and then comes Sifri Chassidus, then comes Sidur of Tefillah, and then comes the Haggadah. Now, the Sifri Chassidus include from all the Rabbeim. If there's any verse that the Rebbe explains in from a mamer of one of the Rabbeim in his Sichos, this is exclusively an index on the Sichos, not Mamorim and not the letters of the Rebbe, but the many times it came up, explanations, elaboration on a certain inyan in a mamer of Alter Rebbe or from the following Rebbes. So it would be mentioned as in a listing in the back. But if the Rebbe would speak about a general inyan in a sefer, like what does Likkutei mean for us, Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, what does Teres Chaim mean, and etc., that would be in the title sefer, and there would be a separate section for the seforim of the Rabbeim.
When you put titles, when you put topics in, is it every time it's mentioned, or every time there's a new twist? Or in other words, sometimes you have a theme in the Rebbe could basically mention the same thing 20 times. Will you put every time?
I mentioned it always. As long as there is a biur, there is something there. It's not just like today you have the computers with pointers, and you don't have to do much with the indexing. It's just the listing of the pointings, and that's it. But I'm doing it as a human person, and therefore I am evaluating it if this is something that will be helpful for a researcher, or it is just mentioned very briefly. So if there's no explanation on it, it's just a verse itself, I don't mention it because I feel that the person will not really find sufficient information that he's looking for.
Going back to the Shabbos Mamorim, was your process similar? Did you have to learn the whole mamer to be able to make a mafteach, or did you more skim through and look for keywords?
I needed to learn the Mamorim. There's no tricks over here. You need to learn the Mamorim, learned it briefly, but picked up on it and noted wherever there was something to be noted. Over there, I did not do a mafteach, an index on psukim, Torah shebiksava, Torah shebal peh, which is the Talmud. I would actually only do inyanim. There was no time for that. And in addition to that, there was one time when I was asked to do by the Mamorim of the Rebbe Rashab, if I'm not mistaken, and I asked the Rebbe, I wrote to the Rebbe that I just did the index on the topics. So the Rebbe wrote, V'zeu ha'ikar. This is the priority.
Why do you think that is?
It seems like, for whatever reason, I don't know, but that the inyanim, the entries, is the most important part of the of the index, which means to say it could very well be that if it had more time, the Rebbe would prefer it. But we see also by the Rebbe, the index on Tanya, that the Rebbe didn't really do much there, psukim b'chulo. In our Yem we do find it. But it seems like by the Rebbe, the stress was the inyanim. And vice this also, that in order not to be limited and taking away time from the index on the in order to do psukim, the Rebbe felt that the priority are the concepts, the inyanim.
When Reb Yoel worked on the sefer ha'archim, did he ever mention to you that he found your maftech helpful in working through the?
My maftech came out in Tafshinai, in Aleph Tafshinai in Beis, which was already years after that. But I do know that at times, first of all, he gave me a yashikir from the maftech. He very much encouraged, after it was done, that it was a very special thing. It was a very unique inyan, essential. And there were times that he would ask Mara Mekemes, he needed to look up something, a sikha from the Rebbe. So he would ask someone who worked with him or was with him to check with me exactly where it is.
This podcast is sponsored by Kollel Aliba de Hilchasa, the brand new Kollel with the Rosh Kollel, Rav Yaakov Goldstein, Skan Rosh Kollel, Rav Menachem Rottenberg, Menahel Poyel, Rav Mendel Weisfish, all active, experienced, Moida Hayra. Follows an 8-year syllabus. Every 6 months is a new topic, broken up into subtopics. Until Pesach, we're learning the halachas of Hilchas Avelus and Biker Cholim. After Pesach, we're learning workplace halacha, Hilchas Ribis, Hilchas Baltolin, and Hilchas Yichud. It's a serious learning Gemara, Shulchan Aruch inside. 3 hours a week of Chavrusa learning. Help find you a Chavrusa, set up a Chavrusa. And then there's 2 in-depth shiurim per week, 2 live shiurim per week. And it's serious learning. Someone that has a busy schedule, 3 to 5 hours a week. Schedule a conversation with the Menahel Poyel today at kollelad.com. Did you enjoy this type of work, or was more something you felt was special to the Rebbe? This is a bit. I could see it as being tedious, but is this something that you like to be thinking in this type of way?
Okay, there were times that I needed encouragement because it's like a long road. My focus was always the light at the end of the tunnel. My vision was it'll come a day that the Rebbe Siches will be open, accessible, and it will be very helpful. And I was always thinking about that, and I was very excited about it. And that really pushed me to get it done. And I would sit hours, especially summertime, I had more time because I didn't teach then, and cover a lot.
How did you have the discipline? What was your protocol for moving along on a decades long project? What was the
It's hard to say.
Like if you're giving advice to someone else that has a big project, what would you be matzia?
I would be matzia. The first thing is that they need to know, to make sure they are systematic. You can't waste time. You have to maybe make sure to make an account, give an account how much you covered every day, and I think that would also push. But again, many people, I heard it from many people that they said they would never be able to do it because this is something which is too heavy, too long, and not something that they see immediate success. And some people lost cheshik for that.
Did you work with a team or you work solo?
I worked myself. I had the laptop, and that was it. Sometimes I marked it on paper because I didn't have the laptop with me, but later I entered it, and the laptop also had this very unique quality that you can sort. You can sort Hebrew, and that at the end of every day I would sort all the topics,
Well, that
And I
wasn't
would
when
see
you're working on the Rashav's Mamorim, you didn't have a laptop. You had a
no,
notebook.
then it was index cards. It was index cards. There was another project that I was eager to be involved, and that is the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe. There was a mafteach, a very famous mafteach that was made on 11 seforim of the Alter Rebbe, and it was over 8 days. 8 days, a group of Jungalites, mostly I was the only bacher then, in Tafshim Memalef, late 1980. The Rebbe wanted it done in a week. Next time he goes to the Eyal, which is from Chedesh Kislev till Tes Kislev. And everybody needed to work on it quickly. We got a quota for every day. We got copies of the pages. Then we needed to meet every day and give over a report to the Rebbe through the Vadla Fotzesichas who were organizing this and communicating with the Rebbe. The Rebbe wanted to see a report every day. And there were many interesting things that happened there. I mean, one of the things was that the Rebbe himself, after it was typeset, the Rebbe himself was reviewing these indexes, these pages, these galleys, and he corrected things, added things, changed things, because let's not forget, this also included some mafteches that the Rebbe made Antanya, Tereir, and Likkutei. So the Rebbe made changes there years later in this on this occasion in Tafshim Memalef Kislev. Another inyan that took place there, which stood out very, very much, and it's probably the only time we see this in 42 years, when the Rebbe asked they should make the Hagdosha. The Hagdosha is the dedication to back. Rabbi Chadika said it's going to cost a lot of money. It's like a few hundred pages. So the Rebbe said the Hagdosha will be for all those who have worked on it, participated.
And your name was next to the Rebbe's, right? Because alphabetically,
yeah. And the Rebbe got the list, and he put his name in. The Rebbe said the name and the mother's name, no family name, and he put it in right near. Zecher was right near my name, Mem, and they wanted to change. They wanted to bold it. They wanted to write Shlita. They wanted to put the Rebbe on the second list. Should be the first one. The Rebbe said no, all together as one. So this is the only time we see that during the Nesias years that the Rebbe Mamish participated and included his name, Biksav Yad Kedesh, in this list.
Why did the Rebbe choose to work only on certain mafteches? Do you have any sort of cheshbon to understand which seforim the Rebbe chose?
The Rebbe made mafteches on a lot of seforim.
Like, how did he choose which ones to? You said that until you started working on the Rashab, no one.
No, there was
before the Nesias.
Yeah. There were the Rebbe made mafteches on the Rebbe Rashav's Mamorim. You'll find in every sefer a maftech. Maybe it's brief. It doesn't have page numbers as mentioned, but the Rebbe poshet whatever ksavim he had by him. The Rebbe chose to make a maftech. The Rebbe made a maftech on Tereir, Likkutei, Tanya. In the middle of the Rebbe's seforim, the Rebbe made maftech. The Ratera came out later. It was the Friedrich Rebbe's until Tafshim Beis. The Rebbe made a maftech on Mamorim. The Friedrich Rebbe. The Rebbe was very much into mafteches. Steichemed, Shalas and Shuvah Samach Tzedek. There's a lot of work. One of them, the Rebbe prepared it. When he prepared it, the Friedrich Rebbe said the world doesn't have any idea how much blood and sweat did my son-in-law invest in this work.
But it sounds like you have an idea, because
listen, who has an idea about the Rebbe's work? But basically, it is. I mean, whoever is involved in maftechas has some kind of idea, because it's work. It's really work. It's focus. You can't just do it like driving through a street. You really have to understand, and you have to really know what you are choosing to put into this onto this entry, because it has to be clear, include whatever you can include, but brief, that a person should be able to understand it and go for it.
Do you think the Rebbe, with his vision with mafteches, wanted people to study Chassidus based on topics, not just Mamorim? Do you think that was I could tell you now with we started, I'm not sure if you're familiar with America's 302, it's called Kollel de Dach. There's over 200 young Galite learning Chassidus, and there's a mashpia in Nyack, Rabbi Klein. He's teaching Chassidus like this already for 10 years. He essentially teaches Chassidus based on sugyas. So it's quite original, But in your opinion, you think this is something the Rebbe was like nudging towards? Don't just do Hamsheichim, do Sugis?
I don't know. I don't remember that the Rebbe should stress it should be sugyas, but the Rebbe did once give his mafteach of the Rebbe of Mamorim to Dr. Menahel. He actually has a copy, film of the Rebbe's Ksav Yakedesh. The Rebbe shared it with him, and he understood from there that the Rebbe gave it to him in order that he should be able to write essays on Chassidus and understand it by doing research in the different the different Mamorim, the different references that he had access to. So it was more for research, but I think in Seder Halimud, it was always by the Rebbe to learn a sefer, designated year.
Were there Chassidim that were a little? I remember as a bacher, Chatoy Ani Maskir, there was a book that was going around from Potak, Chaim Potak, The Chosen, and I was introduced to the concept that the maskilim used to learn the way they presented Torah was very in an academic way, and indexes were somewhat associated with the school of that organized Torah and the maskilim. And I heard this from a number of strong academics that came to the Rebbe's Torah, and they said if not for the Rebbe's approach of to putting Mafteches aside for a second, the Rebbe's approach and the way he learned the Sugya and the Rambam and Rashi, he was very into looking up other texts and textual analysis and different gersois. That way of learning was somewhat associated with not the Charedim. So do you see it as somewhat original that the Rebbe brought in maybe some of these tools that are more used in the academic world? And what was there some pushback from?
I mean, you see in Rashis and other Yonim that the Rebbe's Medayik, the Rebbe appreciated when Rabbi Aaron Chitrik, Olav Shalom, the librarian, found different versions of things of Rashis v'chulu. It was, by the Rebbe, he wanted everything thorough, especially when there were questions on the Rashi, and the Rebbe says it doesn't make sense that, the way we see sometimes in a Rashi, the beginning of a Rashi. So sometimes he would see the Girsa, which he raised question about, and he would then see another Girsa, and he would see that, it's taka, that the Rebbe's point is a strong point. But basically, regarding the Mafteches, I think it's a gift that the Rebbe gave the world. The Rebbe referred to it as Hafotzes Hamayones Chutza. There's a very special sikha that the Rebbe spoke in Nissan time, Tov Shin Mem Aleph, about what the point of Mafteches is. It's like a handle, like Shlomo Melech made Oznayim LeTeira, to be able to have access to Teira. And the Rebbe says this spares a person time from searching for something, and he'll have more time to delving into it and understanding the topic itself. So there's many different times the Rebbe urged authors to write Mafteches. The Rebbe says, how come there's no index in the back of the sefer? The Rebbe was once asked by Rabbi Margolius, a very famous author of many seforim. I think he asked for the get the Mafteach that the Rebbe published then on a certain sefer in the 50s. It was something which was helpful for anybody that's a scholar, anybody that's learning. It opens up a whole new world, and the Rebbe was very much into it and invested even time in the time of the Nesios, as we see Benegea to the Mamorim of the Alter Rebbe, and encouraged others to do it and wrote about it a lot. The unique inyan of a mafteach, which is everlasting. It's an investment for the future, for even the following generations.
If I remember hearing, was your father, did some of this way of organizing Torah that you've caught so much in, is that something that you saw by your father? Did he?
My father Bechlal would write ha'ores, and everything by him was with sources. You could say it's similar. My father wrote sources for everything in Tanya. He learned Tanya with Rabbi Reuben. They learned together in Shanghai. Rabbi Reuben heard things from Rabbi Isaac Baruch, who was a mashpia in yeshiva in Peon. And the Rebbe later asked my father for the Tanya. And a while later, my father realized he didn't make any copies, and he didn't have it with him. So the Rebbe said, you can go into the library, you can ask them if you want it for a while, and then, you can return it. So my father went into the library, they found it. The Rebbe said, Rabbi Levin in the library is very organized. And after he got it, he worked on it probably a week, and then returned it to the library, and I have that Tanya today. Its sources and everything. He was a buck in Tanakh, he was a buck in many things, he didn't talk much, and he Pashit would write. By him, everything was Mekadas, sources for things. He wrote on Gemara, he wrote on Chumash, he wrote on Tanya.
There's that picture he made of an animal, and he has Mekadas all over Chazal for the different parts of the animal. So that's kind of like a graphical mafteach of the animals.
Right. He made that in Poland in 1935. He sent it over before the war to someone here in the United States, and then he got it back. He wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said he should ask a Rav Meir Hiro, somebody who's an active Rav, to give us kama. We send it to Rabbi Yitzchak Pekarsky, was the Rosh Yeshiva in 770, and he would give smicha. He looked here, there, says, everything is all right, 100%. And that's when he released it.
You help researchers, in some of these books in the last 10, 20 years that have come out, you're contacted to help them do research projects, like the book The Rebbe from, what's his name, the modern Orthodox rabbi, I'm forgetting the name, but were you ever, what was the strangest person that reached out to you that wanted to help you do research from the Rebbe's Taita? Were you ever uncomfortable kind of going too far with sharing your knowledge to strange sources?
Okay, it's a good question. Sometimes it's not strange sources who asked, but sometimes I get different kind of inquiries. I get inquiries of people that know for sure the Rebbe said it, but they forgot where and when. Then I get inquiries from people that would wish to be able to find it in the Rebbe's Sikha in order they should make a point about it. So it's like schlepping the Rebbe into their agenda.
Right.
And the Rebbe never spoke about it. The Rebbe never addressed it. Or to fuel certain machlekes or something. So, and I don't have anything from the Rebbe. I say, I'm sorry, he did not address it. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, generally the Rebbe addressed everything under the sun. I mean, from landing on the moon and talking about eclipse and computers and chemistry, the chemical elements, everything. I mean, there was twice a year the Rebbe would speak to the college students when they had vacation, end of December, end of June, and the Rebbe would dedicate a sikha in something new in technology.
This podcast is sponsored by Smichas Chaver Chabad, Halacha U, and Women's Halacha Circle. In over 100 communities around the world, Halacha for everyone. Halacha curriculum that we provide for your community to teach the halachas, to engage people in halacha, to make halacha interesting. We have Smichas Chaver Chabad for Anash communities. For those that have a yeshiva background, we have HalachaU U, which are advanced courses being taught in Chabad houses around the world. For those that don't have a yeshiva background but want serious, roll up your sleeve learning, super engaging, take them through the journey of the halacha down to the super, super practical. Every 6 months is a new topic. After Pesach, we are starting the sugya of workplace halachas, the laws of ribis, the laws of baltolan, paying your workers on time, and the laws of yichud. Fascinating sugyas. We have it on various levels for those that have a yeshiva background, those that don't have a yeshiva background, for women as well. Check out SCP-Chabad.org or HalachaU.org. Click join to schedule a meeting with me to learn more. And in this index, the Erichim you have are not just topics in Torah. You have Christopher Columbus and and whatnot, and it's the full range of Sichas Chulin Shetalmidei Chachamim Tzrichin Limud. It's all over the place.
Exactly. There's things from the Rebbe. I mean, the Rebbe spoke about Shakespeare. The Rebbe spoke about Christopher Columbus. The Rebbe spoke about Lincoln. Pashut lines that the Rebbe dropped, which are Pashut. People are not aware how much the Rebbe thoroughly covered what he felt needs to be covered. And there's Avelt. There's Mamish Avelt. In fact, this Mafteach Yonim, there were others that asked, why is it not in 2 volumes? So when it came to publish it, I think it was the 2nd volume, I took a survey, asked 10 people, and said, which would you prefer? I think 7 out of 10 said they prefer it in 1 because that's considered a desk reference instead of having to do legwork, running for the volume which covers Aleph to Mem or covers Nun to Tov. So this is what I went by. Since then, I did not stop, but still keeping my eyes open that if there's anything new, any interviews, things people heard from the Rebbe, things that were published in Kfar Chabad, etc., I note them. And at this point, there's about over 160 pages, Hashlomes, Miluyim, on this Mafteach.
The book I was referring to was Telushkin. So he got
Telushkin. He sat with me a while. I don't remember what the topics were. He sat with me a while. They told me that he's going to want to, they told me from Chabad.org that, he's going to ask questions, things, but it was very able, and, whatever he asked, I answered him. I mean, which was factual. It wasn't like, something that the Rebbe didn't say or something which is not to be published.
I mean, one of the controversial things in his book, no one says you're putting a haskama on it, but he discussed the Rebbe's position with Riskin and the Sefer Torah. He just brings the
first word,
the first Madura. He doesn't mention the second letter.
That's actually not in my Mafteach because it's a letter, not a sikha.
Oh, so interesting. So you don't bring letters.
I mean, I do have an index also on Kfar Chabad. So basically, a lot of people asked me for these 2 letters, the Yechidus and the letter.
Right. So you have, for example, even people coming by the Rebbe by dollars. You mentioned that in here. Why don't you include letters in this in 1 volume? Why don't
because Sichas and Sudas upstairs and dollars are all the spoken word. If I start with letters, it's a whole new thing. In fact, the publisher said, don't come back again with this job because 1,600 pages is too big a job to do in 1 volume.
Wow. Because you include, like Lamashal, that letter from Riskin was
a letter.
I mean, it was when you sent it to me, it was in a Kfar Chabad. It wasn't even published yet.
It was a letter. It was a Yechidus, but later the Rebbe in the letter, the Rebbe changed it.
Right.
So I'm not putting in a half a thing because the second part is the letter, which is not a sikha.
But sometimes you could have the Rebbe retracting.
I want to say I didn't do sikhas. I didn't do mamorim. I mean, I'm sorry. I didn't do letters. I didn't do mamorim. It's a whole field for itself. I have a separate index on Rishimas from the Rebbe, which we made, 20 years ago, over 20 years ago.
Is the Rishimas included? Rishimas is included in this Chassidus or not? That's also
no. It's a separate index that Kahos printed, so it was separate. It was Kevia Bracha Latzma. I did include Sichas from the Rebbe before the Nesios. They were separate, based on articles, based on interviews, based on a sefer called Sichas from Tafresh Peites to Tafshin Yud. A lot of Sichas which are based on being interviews with people who were present at these Fabrengens, and they were included.
I want to ask you. I found this very interesting. The missing years of the Mamorim that were missing. How could something like that happen? And we're not just talking about like 1 mamer. There's like probably a dozen or 20 Mamorim that are missing from the years. Like, how did that come? How did that happen? With the lamas, I mean, there were like, didn't they have a system set up by then?
It's hard to say, but there were times that Chazorah was very poor. There was no Chazorah. For example, the beginning of the 60s, Tavshachov Gimel, 63, was a year that we don't have so many Mamorim from there. Although the Rebbe did say Mamorim.
Wasn't Reb Yoel active?
Yeah, was there, but sometimes he got busy with Sefer Erkim, which began then. So this could also be a fact why it stopped. And that's when later Chazorah started with 5 Bocharim who were chosen to help with Chazorah a few years later. Vad Hanochas Atmimim, they were called. Now you're asking, how could it be when the Lamets? My question is, there was a Fabrengen Tovshin Lamed Dalet. That's late 1973, in the middle of the War of Yom Kippur. First, I think it was the first night of Sukkot. The Rebbe Fabrengen in Shul, dry, no l'chaim, nothing. Of course, it's not in the Sukkah. There was a Fabrengen, a short Fabrengen, but there was a Fabrengen, a Sichas, and a mamer. We do not have anything from the Sichas besides 2-3 lines. The mamer we have, but not the Sichas. So think about it a minute. You have over here Crown Heights people. You have Orchim who came for Tishrei, and that in those years already, there was a nice bunch of Orchim coming. And here is a Fabrengen, a very special Fabrengen that the Rebbe speaks about. How come people are not Fabrengen? And Shoin, Sie geblieben hängen, it's left in the air. The only husband that I have is that everybody went straight to Fabrengen, and they didn't even think of Chazorah. They went immediately to fulfill what the Rebbe wanted from us.
So in the Lamed, that's the only example.
I did write. I myself wrote Hanochas for myself. Beginning of the Lameds, I wrote Mamorim, and later I started to write Sichas till the mamer, and then I continued in the Mems. I was asked to continue, and so there is Hanochas Proteus, which not everything are in the official formal Sichas. In Yonim that the Nulachatchil, the Rebbe doesn't want it published, so it was kept private. There are Hanochas Proteus, which you have many of these pieces. When you get to certain issues, etc.
In terms of your research, this is something often when I give shiurim, there's certain people that wrinkle their noses when I quote a certain housekeeper of the Rebbe, or even some of the maskiris. It's like in terms of determining, and when if we have time, we're gonna get to your sefer on Shabbos Kodesh. What type of filter did you have when you quote Yemanim? And how were there some more legitimate than others?
Okay, I'm not going to go into. Of course, I'm not going to mention names. There are some that work in the house who are trustworthy, and there were some that I was doubtful about them. I was cautioned by people that it's not 100%. It's not Teda Messinai, and that's basically how I caution myself. And
did you leave certain names were left out? Certain Yemanim were not included in your research.
Yemanim and
according on Haggis of the Rebbe. So, like, in your
I don't know some of the Haggis, if they were not from 100% reliable, I don't even know if I quoted them because what am I gonna? I didn't want to unless it was confirmed by another one. Certain people. I just didn't want to even quote them, even without mentioning the name, because I just felt that it's not of any value to me.
Right.
Because I'm writing something and people are relying on that, and I just didn't want to mislead people if I didn't know something for sure.
Then sometimes you see like contradictory minus. Did you kind of leave that out if there were just different reports?
Okay, so again, minus are writings.
I'm not minus, I'm sorry. Contradictory Yemanim or
Yemanim is all right. So it could be if the same story is told and one contradicts the other, that's a little issue. And I don't remember coming across that because generally I would take it from the Sichas and it was, Shita Achida, that they all agreed on it. But when it get to the muscle between the Sichas that the Rebbe said something to someone and somebody said, no, they heard it different. Okay,
we just had on Yontif, that's on Shabbos, do you say Rebbeinu Shalom? So the Rabbanim are all over the place because this person thought he heard the Rebbe said this, and this person thought that Rebbe
said that. Right. I'm not. It's not that either it's not something that I heard from the Rebbe. I didn't see it, but there are people, from trustworthy Rabbanim, which we did see it. So, so it's between them, it's a whole shaklavitaria. But by me, if the Rebbe said it, it's in. If I saw it by the Rebbe myself, it's in. I wrote Yumanim, I wrote diaries. From Tov Pesach Lamed Zayin, I wrote Lamed Ches the year, Lamed Ches, Lamed Tes, Mem, Aleph. I got married.
You were part of the Chazara teams at any point?
I was not. But I would write it for myself Mitzvah Shabbos, and when they found out, they asked me they wanted to see my Hanocha, and so it would basically go to Lahak or to Hanocha Satmimim, and there was one time that I was at Chazorah, but it was in a different way than the way I was used to it. I would chazer the way I heard it from the Rebbe, and sometimes Rabbi Yoel would chazer, like just to get to the point, but a little twist. Like you have the sichas today, some of them are takamuga, but they're prepared in a way that it's not the way the Rebbe said it. The Rebbe did not want it recorded in writing the way he said it. So therefore, it's like a whole different approach. But I would write it. I have them. I would hand them in, or I fax it to them, and as long as it was helpful to them. Sometimes it can even be a few words, and it can make a difference to them. Because by the Rebbe in general, as Rabbi Zimmer, Rabbi Yoel Zimmer, who edited the first few volumes of Sichas, wrote it in a way that the Rebbe's Sichas are like threaded together, woven together from one inyan to another. If a person misses one little word, so sometimes they have in the Sichas, they write chaser le'eze inyan nemar. They found loose words, for example, they don't know where it comes in, or they're missing the connection between one inyan and another. It's the Rebbe Poshet sold, the Rebbe created, the Rebbe built. It's a whole gebuy, it's a whole structure, a sicha, and one thing leads to the other.
So you didn't join the Chazara teams. You felt that wasn't your inyan.
I Poshet felt that I was inclined more to write the way the Rebbe said it. They want to change it, gesundheit. But I did have one time.
Which path do you think is better for the Chassidim?
For writing, for publishing, the Rebbe wanted it should be able to be readable. It should be not the way he says it. It shouldn't be like a transcript, dictation, how he said it. There was one time, it was in Tavshim Memtes, 1989. They were already preparing Mamorim then, the Kontresim for every Yom Tov and Yom the Pagra. And it was then that I was told by someone who was working in the Hanochas that they asked for my Hanocha of a mamer that I wrote in Tavshin Lamed Beis 1972. A mamer Odem Ki Yakriv Mekem, based on the Rebbe Rashab. It was right in the Beis Nissan, the Lul of the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe was ready there should be Mugas. So Rabbi Yoel Khan asked, if they can get my Hanocha, and they used it.
Okay, Agres Nyashikayach for your time. If I can just conclude with, we're coming now from Chof nissan, kind of, if you had to guess, what's Mashiach still waiting for us Chassidim to do, the Tutalt Vazer Kent? Where should we focus?
The Rebbe told us to learn in Yoni Gula and live in Yoni Gula. Weiter from them, what do we know more than that? It's just a day closer. That I can just say, an interesting day people don't realize. That is the day when Yidden went into Yisrael. The walls of Yericho fell. The wall fell on Chavches Nisan. Rebbe spoke about it many times in Sichas. Vatipel hachemo, after 7 days surrounding Yericho. So it's interesting. That's the day that Rebbe is speaking about the inyan of Bula Mitzvah Vashlema.
Okay, Emrit Hashem. I can't think of a better candidate to join us on HalachaU, as we're coming from Chof nissan. One of the big things that the Rebbe put the load on the mashpiyim to continue to deliver and interpret and guide us through the Rebbe's vast sea of hidois and messages. So we'll be coming back to Rabbi Seligson for questions, and thank you so much for your time. The Rebbe should give you the kayach to continue teaching and being and working on Chassidus and making it clearer and clearer for us and the whole world.
Amen.
Okay. This podcast is sponsored by Kollel Dach. Revolutionize your limud Chassidus. Join over 200 shluchim and anash that are taking their limud Chassidus to the next level. In Kollel Dach, you have expert mashpiyim, Reb Asher Farkash, Reb Yosef Klein, Reb Yitzchak Coffin, numerous guest mashpiyim that learn Chassidus in a unique way, broken up by sugyas. Every 2-3 months, we take a new sugya and we dissect it from its haskalah to its avodah, level by level. For bringing on the sugya, discussing the avodah aspects of the sugya, the practical application of the sugya. Schedule a conversation today with the Menahel or Paltiel and learn Chassidus like you have never done before. This podcast is sponsored by Kollel Chabad. Kollel Chabad is a community of experienced Rabbanim, aspiring Rabbanim, over 100 shluchim and anash from around the world, staying fresh in sugyas of community Rabbanos, learning over 8 to 10 hours a week, Gemara, Tur, Beis Yosef, Rosh Kollel, Sgan Rosh Kollel, senior poskim, follow-up, chavrusa placement, to be able to stay fresh in these sugyas and to learn not just shimush and practical psak, but also shimush in the room of Rabbanos. The Kollel has so far learned over the past 2 years the sugyas of Tvilas Kelim and Agalas Kelim, Hilchas Nida, and we're soon going to be starting Hilchas Mikvois, and you can join at any time. Schedule a conversation with the Rosh Kollel today at kollelrabbanechabad.org.
If you've reached this part of the video, you probably enjoyed it. Please consider donating a video or many videos. Help us continue doing these amazing interviews. Or you may do it in honor of someone, in memory of someone. It's all good. Hope you enjoyed and see you in the next video.